Today I'll be discussing the topic Growth of Regional Parties since 1967. India has chosen to have multi-party system from the time of independence. Unlike China, which has a one-party system, or USA and UK, which has a two-party or bi-party system, this choice of India has been conscious. Now here, of course, we might wonder that why India chose this multi-party system. Now this was chosen keeping in mind the diversity and plurality of the people, communities, religion, language, and the different dialects that we have. And our Indian constitution, the makers, felt that her democratic ethos, because mind you, when India became independent, it was one of the first democratic countries in the world at the time in 1947. The constitution makers thought that the democratic ethos can be realized only through a multi-party system through which the different kind of voices of the multiplicity, the plurality of people can be properly represented. Now when I am talking about a political party, because multi-party system constitutes of different parties, what do we understand by a political party? In India, specifically, to be recognized as a political party, associations or body of individuals, and those individuals essentially need to be citizens of India. They have to apply to the Election Commission of India after their formation, within a month of their formation, with the petition of recognition, and they have to apply for a particular symbol. And this symbol has to be in accordance with the provisions of Election Symbols Reservation and Allotment Order 1968. Now, among the multiple parties India has, there are both national parties and regional parties. And there are particular set criterions for national parties as well as regional parties. So let us first look into the particular three set of criterions which a national parties require. First is, they have to secure at least 6% of valid votes polled in an election to Lok Sabha. They have to win at least one Lok Sabha seat. And thirdly, a national party has to win at least 3% of the total number of seats or minimum of 3 seats in the Legislative Assembly, whichever number is higher. A national party has to be eligible and fulfill all these 3 criterions to retain its national status. What about the regional parties? Regional parties similarly has 3 set of criterions. First is, it has to win at least 1 seat in the Lok Sabha for every 25 seats or any fraction thereof allotted to that state. Secondly, it has to secure at least 6% of the valid votes polled in an election to the state legislative assembly. And thirdly, it has to win at least 2 seats in the state legislative election. Now, regional parties have many criterions, many characteristics which go on changing over time in India, and they depend upon their particular circumstance of formation. Still, I'd like to mention 1 or 2 particular fundamental characteristics which differentiate a regional party from any other national or local. Regional parties essentially are restricted to a particular state, and they are rooted, they grow from the regional aspirations and grievances, which are broadly social, cultural, and economic in nature. They identify essentially with the region's culture, language, religion, etc. For instance, any regional party essentially in their election manifesto puts the local or regional issues first, and that is their point of strength. Secondly, the regional parties represent the regional perspectives. They highlight the regional perspectives more than the national issues. Thirdly, and most importantly, even underscoring these characteristics, we have to keep in mind that there is no uniform trajectory or formula which can differentiate or which can identify a regional party's growth, because any particular event or occurrence at the local level also might stimulate the growth or popularity of a regional party. Now, when we are talking about national and regional parties or the Indian political space, we have to note something, that the rise of the regional parties though this particular topic essentially focuses on the period after 1967, their rise did not happen after 1967. Instead, the regional parties, which underscore the regional aspirations, have been in motion or have been in formation much before independence. But till 1947, it was the Congress Party which loomed large as the only or major national party in the Indian scene. Then why is that? Till 1947, the founders of the Congress, as well as her prominent members, were key freedom fighters and nationalist leaders, a fact that worked for the popularity of the Congress, especially in the run-up to the freedom. After India became independent, from that time, 1947, to 1962, that is, 1962 is particularly important because India lost the major war against China in that year. 1947 to 62, this was also a phase which is underscored by the eminence of Congress. As the major national party, it was under the umbrella of Congress that the government was formed, and Nehru or Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister then. Still at that time, we find there were regional parties who had originated in the 1920s and 30s, like Shiromani Akal Dal, SAD in Punjab, DMK, Dravida Munnethra Kazhagam, AIA-DMK. These three parties, they were there, but they had started much earlier in the 1920s and 1930s. But they were not getting their space properly because the Congress, by that time, because of the huge mandate that Nehru had got, was taking all the limelight. 1962 war was a turning point for Indian politics, as well as for Congress, as well as for the regional parties. 1962, when India lost the war to China, opponents like Left, Jansangh, they criticized Nehru's pacifist stand and also the Congress' reliance on non-violent methods. Nehru's death in 1964 brought an end effectively to the monopoly or to the dominance of Congress in the Indian political scene, thus clearing the air or creating a void, and the regional parties were quick to seize the opportunity. A particular question comes to mind, that is, did India informally practice a one-party system till 1964 because Congress was the only dominant party at that time? Historically, the answer is no. Despite the Congress's importance or monopoly, so-called monopoly, the regional parties in their particular states were important and they were gradually coming up, like the SAD, like the DMK, as I had mentioned. So around 1964-65, they were quite popular in their particular states. Apart from the DMK or SAD, there were other parties like AIA-DMK, which was a fraction of DMK in Tamil Nadu itself, or the Telugu Desam Party, TDP. So in South India and in Punjab especially, we see these stirrings of regional parties which were taking the opportunity to fill up the void after the fall of Congress. Now, after Nehru's death in 1964, Lal Bahadur Shastri became the new Prime Minister, but after his death in 1966, Indira Gandhi became the third Prime Minister of independent India. From that time onwards, we can see a paradigmatic shift in Indian politics, and it was also a time when regional parties, regional aspirations started raising their head all over India. Though the Congress was in power, but it was no more a Congress quasi-monopoly or Congress absolute monopoly anymore. Now here I'll like to test your knowledge and ask you a particular question. Name two regional political parties that were important in India around 1964. Now after Indira Gandhi came to power, within a year, we find that there was the Lok Sabha election of 1967. Now, this particular 1967 election is considered to be a watershed election in Indian politics. Why is that? 1967 witnessed, unlike other years, many landmark, many important events which changed the course of Indian politics, the complexion of Indian politics forever. The first is there was a so-called breakdown of what we may say the Congress system. For the first time in 1967, we find that of the 16 states where they contested, Congress failed to gain a majority in more than 8 states. This was the first time since independence. This meant Congress was being rejected. The ethos of Congress, or maybe the policies or governance pattern of Congress, were not accepted in those 8 states where they lost majority. Moreover, Congress won the Lok Sabha elections not by a huge mandate, unlike in the earlier elections. It won by a very slender majority. Thirdly, the traditional Congress vote banks which were there in the countryside, that is the rural backup, the rural voters, they sort of started shifting their reliance from the Congress to the new coming up regional parties. Now, within a couple of years of 1967, in 1969, there was a bitter infighting within the Congress where there was a split. The Congress became divided into Congress I, constituting of supporters of Indira Gandhi, known as Indira Congress, and Congress O, the old Congress or original Congress, led by senior Congress leader S. Nijalingappa. Apart from this particular first landmark event of 1967, the second was growth of regional power and parties. There were many regional power which did not perhaps seize state power at that time, but they were on their way. So we find in Kerala, the leftists, largely Communist Party, in Orissa, the rightist party coalition, in Madras, DMK, they all came to power. In West Bengal, Bihar, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, and Punjab, state powers did not seize power at that time, but Congress lost its absolute majority, which was the first after independence. Now, what were the reasons for the unpopularity of the Congress? What were the reasons for the regional parties to come up at the expense of Congress? Mainly grievances, but the grievances did not have a particular uniform nature as they varied from state to state. In Tamil Nadu, the DMK, the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, they exploited the language issue or the fear of domination of Hindi. Their main agenda or moot issue was Tamil was a classical language and they were unwilling to heed the domination of Hindi, which they perceived to be a domination of the center in disguise. There were protests, there were demonstrations, and all these worked in the state in favor of DMK to come to power. In Punjab again, the issue was completely different, and the Shiromani Akali Dal, the SAD, was in power. They highlighted the centre's negligence of their traditional demand of creation of a separate state for the Sikhs. And this particular demand the SAD has been making not from the 1960s. The demand which was in tune with their demand for the respect for separate Gurumukhi language of the Sikhs, it was there from the 1930s. In 1966, the centre had to bow down to the demand and Haryana was separated from Punjab. In Uttar Pradesh and Delhi, Jan Sangh became very powerful. Their agenda was again different. They were lobbying, they were rallying for the sensitive issue of cow slaughter and they were against it. So the protestations against cow slaughter in Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, the northern belt of India, were led by Jan Sangh. The third landmark event of 1967 was the growth of coalition politics. Coalition politics, or for the first time in independent India, coalition governments were formed in not less than 9 Indian states. Now, what are coalition governments? Coalition governments are formed when no party can secure a single majority and has to take assistance from other parties to form government, be that at the state level, regional level, or at the central level. So evidently, in 1966, there was an anti-Congress and pro-region wave. The fourth landmark event of 1967 was new regional parties sprang up, and they were all formed by ex-congressmen. For instance, in West Bengal, we find the formation of Bangla Congress. In Bihar, Jana Kranti Dal. In Orissa, Swatantra or Freedom Party. All these were breakaways from respective state congress bodies, and these breakaways symbolized discontent against the national as well as the state congress leadership. So, the distrust stemmed from a different way of looking at the regional issues. Now, Indian politics from 1967 onwards, therefore, took on a different complexion, and it never went back to the earlier state. Now, 1967 to 1979, if we see, was marked first by the 1971 war. The war against Pakistan, the Bangladesh war, where India famously won, and this win brought the Congress back to power under Indira Gandhi's leadership. This year also saw a major alliance between Bharatiya Jansangh BJS, Congress O, and Samyukta Socialist Party SSP. The years till 1974 end were uneventful for national as well as regional politics, but from 1974 end, a storm started brewing in Bihar, which took the form of the JP movement, Jayaprakash Narayan movement. Jayaprakash Narayan was a veteran Gandhian in his ideals, and it was essentially started as a student movement against the corruption of the state government, but gradually it turned against the Congress incumbencies at the center and took the shape of a total revolution. JP started touring entire India, forming anti-Congress alliances, thus stitching the regional discontents. This in part, and also student insurgencies in other parts of India like West Bengal, led to the declaration of emergency by Indira Gandhi. Now, declaration of emergency is considered to be a very bleak time. It is considered to be a very bleak act, black act in fact, which led to the suspension of freedom of speech, free press, free congregation of people in the states. From whatever I've discussed till now, I'd like to ask another question. Name the movement that was started in Bihar in 1975. Because of this declaration of emergency, within 2 years, Congress lost power at the center. And this was the first time from independence that a different party was at the center. In 1977, we have the Janata Dal. Janata Dal ousted Congress from power, and Morarji Desai became the new Prime Minister. So the shift was happening not only at the regional plane but also at the national plane. And since Janata Dal was a new party, it in a way strengthened, it in a way encouraged the regional parties. They were not afraid of the Congress leadership anymore to that extent. However, the Janata Dal could not keep power for more than 2 years, and 1979 saw the fall of Janata Dal and return of Congress and Indira Gandhi to power. Now, between 1979 to 1990, nothing major happened in the regional plane except for the regional disturbances, be that in Kashmir, Punjab is a Khalistani movement, in the northeast, Manipuri movement, Assam insurgencies. So insurgencies were taking place all over India from the different states by parties led by regional parties, which were mostly radical parties labeled by the center as terrorist outfits who wanted to carve out separate statehood. We look at the Indian politics, we take off the Indian politics, the course, from 1990 again. From 1990, the 1991, Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. It started with the liberalization, the free trade. The year 1996 saw, for the second time, a new national party assume power, BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party. The BJP came to power under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, but it did not have the single largest majority, so it could stay in power only for 13 days. The United Front, incidentally, which was a 14-party coalition formed under Janata Dal, ousted BJP to form the new government. So here we see the coalition party government or the coalition party politics, which was forming from 1967 onwards, has now become so important that at the central plane, it could bring a new party, the United Dal, into power. The United Dal, however, could not stay in power for more than 2 years, as in 1998, BJP again formed government, and this time under the NDA, the National Democratic Alliance, under Vajpayee. Interestingly, one of the allies, regional allies of this NDA was Trinamool Congress, TMC, which was formed in the same year under the fiery leader Mamata Banerjee. So coalition politics, which was clearly an offshoot of regional powers' aspirations, continued to rule at the center. After the BJP lost power, we find that from 2004 to 2014, in the form of UPA 1 and UPA 2, the coalition politics was most eminent. UPA 1, United Progressive Alliance, from 2004 to 2008, where Congress was the major party, Congress was supported by the left, BSP, that is Bahujan Samaj Party, and Samajwadi Party. In its second stint, that is from 2009 to 2014, UPA 2, the Congress received the same kind of allies, but this period, Congress was scam-ridden. All sorts of scam started corroding the base that UPA had built in the first 5 years. And gradually, most of its allies started leaving Congress. And at the time, a new regional party started gaining prominence in the south under Jagan Reddy, known as YSR, or the Yuvajana Shramika Rithu Congress Party. YSR was formed in Andhra Pradesh under Jagan Reddy, where many Congress men joined. Now, before we concentrate what happened on the national scene, let us go back in the formative years between 2009 to 2014 at the regional level. In 1998, after Trinamool Congress had come to power, they had slowly built their base, their popular stations, they had built their legitimacies, and in 2011 we find the TMC ousted CPIM, the Communist Party of India Marxist, after their 34-year rule stint from West Bengal with a huge mandate. The next year, we find the Aam Aadmi Party, AAP, formed by Arvind Kejriwal and a few of his allies, like-minded people like Prashant Bhushan, Anna Hazare, forming the government in Delhi in alliance with INC. In 2014, there was a huge historic change at the center when the NDA, the National Democratic Alliance, under Narendra Modi, formed government for the first time with regional allies like Shiv Sena, Samta Party, Telugu Desam Party, and this victory was a historic party. Around 2019, that is in the next stint of NDA, the Shiv Sena opted out, but that has not weakened the base of the NDA to any extent. Okay, so from whatever we have discussed till now, I'd like to ask a question. Now answer the following. Name any 2 regional parties whose leaders were ex-congressmen. Concludingly, we can say that the regional parties, if we trace their growth from 1967 onwards, they have largely worked for and showcased the state and the local issues and attended to grievances which were not raised at the central platform. Many a times they have compromised with the center or with this particular prominent leadership. Many a times 2 or 3 regional parties have come together to form alliances. 1967 onwards, it also witnessed constructive phases of cooperation and negotiation not only between the state regional parties but also between the national and the regional parties. In fact, the coalition governments are a proof of that cooperation. The regional parties have become a constant fixture of Indian politics. In fact, it can definitively be said that the existence of regional parties, their eminence which has been rising, clearly indicates that Indian federalism is a functional federalism, where the center and the regions, they all have their space under the sun. And the regional parties have been rising, have been becoming prominent either in government formation or as the opposition. So they have been making valuable stands, they have been making valuable issues, valuable points, both at the central and at the regional level. So without the regional presence, the center, to a large extent, cannot, it might be argued, legitimize its presence in the government anymore. This was a huge shift, paradigmatic shift we can say, that happened after 1967. Before that, when in the time that Congress enjoyed or could enjoy a semi-monopoly of sort in the center, this was not so. But the eminence of the regional parties also showcase the different layers, the different complexities that Indian society, economy is undergoing all the time.